What's up, fellow Climates? In this video, the Java Fundamentals tutorial, we'll be going over loops. In Java, a loop is code that executes as long as a certain condition is reached. Loops can save time and efficiency from having to repeat code and make code more clean. You can have a loop that goes for as long as you want, though it is ideal to have some defined stopping point. Infinite loops are loops that don't end, meaning they'll keep going on until a manual intervention happens to shut down the program. Infinite loops can be avoided by using defined stopping points in loops. With loops, there are four major types of loops. There is the while loop, the do-while loop, the for loop, and the enhanced for loop, also called the for each loop. The while loop executes code as long as a condition in the while condition is true. And the syntax for the while condition is similar to the if condition, except instead of the if keyword, you use the while keyword. The do-while loop is similar to the while loop, with the difference being that the do-while loop always executes at least once. While loops only execute if a condition is true, the do-while loop executes even if the initial condition is not true. The while condition comes after the do statement, which is why the do-while loop always executes at least once. For loops, like while and do-while loops, allow you to execute code a specified number of times. For loops are very useful when you know exactly how many times you need to execute code. The initialization variable in the for loop only executes once, and you can think of this as starting the car before you're ready to drive. The condition to be met is checked to determine if the statements in the for loop should be executed. If so, the block of code will execute, and if not, the loop will not execute, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the loop ends. After the code in the loop gets executed, or in some cases doesn't execute, the loop control goes back to the update statement. This update statement is important to prevent infinite loops. This loop will keep evaluating the condition statement to determine if the block of code needs to be executed until it's reached the point where the condition is false. Then once the condition is false, the for loop will end. A for each loop is similar to a for loop. This type of for loop executes code from an array or collection object. The for each loop is more clean to use than a for loop from a coding perspective. There are benefits to using either type of for loop, so it usually comes down to preference. So as we saw in the for loop syntax, it was a bit confusing to look at, but with the for each loop, all you pretty much have to do is have the for keyword, and then within the parentheses, the condition is just the data type of the variable and then the array or collection that you have. The data type of the variable should be compatible with the data type in the array or collection. The array or collection are the list of values that you want to output in the array. Break statements are used to exit out of a loop or switch statement, and the keyword is just break, as we saw with the switch statements in the previous tutorial. So when you think of break statements, they can be seen as exiting a video early because some condition has been met when watching the video. Either you found out what you were looking for or the video was boring. Continue statements skip the statements from the loop that was supposed to be executed, moving on to the next statement in the loop. And the keyword for this is just continue. The skipping of the statement is based on a condition that was met in the block of code. Now that we have an understanding of loops, let's go test out these loop conditions in the code. Alright, so now we're in the code editor, and the first loop we'll be creating is a while loop. Alright, so I created a basic while loop here. So we set the variable I equal to 0, and then we're checking it while this variable is less than 100, exclusive. And then we're just going to be outputting that number. And then we'll be incrementing 10 times. So let's run the code right now. So when I run this code right now, we see that it outputs the numbers starting from 10 all the way up to 90, excluding 100 because we checked if the while loop was less than 100. And you see that it was incrementing in tens, so 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way up to 90. So now let's test out how to do a do-while loop. All right, so we create our do-while loop right now, so I'm sure you can determine what's going to happen next. So just analyze this code, and then we can determine what's going to happen once we execute the code. All right, so here we executed the code, and as you can see here, do-while loop only executed the output statement, the number 10, once, and then it stopped executing. So as we can see here, as you know, the do-while loop only executes once. And if we look at the while condition, we see that while I is less than 10, so because our value of I is equal to 10, that means the while condition is false. But because of the do-while loop, it executes at least once. So basically, it'll execute once, and then once it goes to the while condition and checks that the condition is false because I is not less than 10, the do-while loop will stop execution. So now that we know how to do a do-while loop, let's do a for loop. All right, so I created some code for the for loop, I just wanted to do something a bit different since we'd be working with integers for quite a bit. So I decided to use a string for the variable this time. So here we have our for loop, and we're going to be initializing our initial I variable as 0. That'll be our index for the for loop. And then we're going to be checking if I is less than the length of the spelling. So basically we're going to be checking if the length of this word right here, exclamation, has been reached. And if not, then after we're going to keep incrementing I, then outputting to the print line statement. So I'm sure you can determine what's going to be happening. So let's check it out. All right, so we have our result, and we see in the command line, it outputted the spelling of each letter for the spelling variable exclamation in each line. Here, basically what's happening is that our initializing variable I is output using the index of the value of the spelling variable. And then once the condition has been reached, which is the length of the number of characters of the value of the spelling variable, then the condition exits. All right, and finally, we have our for each loop. So I created a string array called colors, and it contains 4 values, red, blue, green, and yellow. And in this for each loop on between line 9 and 11, I created an output statement that will output the list of values, all the values of the colors array. So let's execute the code right now. All right, so we've executed the code, and we see that in the command line, there's 4 lines that were returned. And it looks like it's in the order of what the array is. So red, blue, green, and yellow. So that's a quick example of for each loop. And those are some examples of how to work with loops. You're going to be playing around with loops a lot in the future as you go on into your programming adventures. So just try to keep practicing this a little bit more on your own, and you'll be a pro at it. All right, here's our assignment for this topic. Number 1, what are the 4 types of loops? Number 2, write a while loop that outputs only even numbers, up to the number 20. Number 3, using a do while loop, do the same as question 2. What do you notice? Number 4, use a for loop, do the same as question 2. Number 5, write a for loop that increments by 1 up to 100 and skips every number divisible by 20 and breaks from the for loop after the number 90 is output. If this video was of any value to you, then please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.